big on the book interviews, but this one struck me.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Do like to support the projects of local cool people. In full disclosure, my guest tonight is a golf friend, and I found out the other day he's an author. The things you'll learn about people. I'll tell you what the title is. Dead Bodies, Snakes, and Bedbugs, My Life as a Multi-Family Landlord. You'll see the cover here in a minute. This better be good. I never thought that the life of a local landlord would be that which you read a book about and/or could tell tall tales, but we'll see coming up here this evening. Great to have you aboard. Thanks very much for tuning in to my State of Mind on this Thursday evening. Let me hit a couple of different bases before we get to the conversation with my guest, Dan Cesaroni, tonight. You know, this is just an awful, awful tragedy. That you talk about fate and being in the wrong place at the wrong time. You know, one fatality, but a firefighter who did the best he could to prevent that from happening. This Southwest hero, as he's known, this Texas firefighter who was on a return trip home with his family from New York to Texas that got rerouted to Philadelphia, spoke today at a press conference.
I felt the calling to get up and do something, stand up and act. My heart goes out to Jennifer and her family. I can't imagine what they're going through.
Yeah, me neither. He was very humble and very respectful of not going through the play-by-play of what he had to do with others to try to save that woman's life, who, by the way, was belted in. So one can only think about the trauma having a window bust open, you know, at 30,000 feet. What is also important, and we're going to talk about tomorrow night here with sociologist Professor Friedman from Brown University, is the way the story has been portrayed, re the pilot of Southwest and her life story and her inability during her career in the military, Air Force tried, Navy success, as a fighter pilot, not to get into combat. She is somebody who reportedly is at the best of the best in her field, and her calm, cool, and collected disposition in landing that plane, I think, grabbed America by a little bit of at least a short breath or a pause, because most of us probably assumed that it was a male pilot. Maybe Sully was back in action, right? When you listen to the audio, and you should look it up if you get a chance, of the way she was able to manage that whole traumatic situation, you'll have a heck of a lot of respect for her and question, perhaps, over the last few decades, why we didn't allow women to do everything men did in the air. It's a fascinating conversation. Next, the president. This is kind of interesting. Amidst trying to figure out what we're doing with North Korea and promises of not firing Mueller and Rosenstein, this promise that he's going to run again this week and hiring lots of campaign folks caused maybe his media nemesis, CNN, to run a little informal poll. They've been running around Washington over the last 24 hours trying to nail down support for President Trump from his GOP party comrades in the Senate and in the House. And some 24 were interviewed, and barely any said that they would support the president for re-election. Many of them balked. Senator Corker from Tennessee wondered out loud why he would even think about running for re-election. This amidst the base, you know, holding firm for Donald Trump, but the establishment Republican Party that, you know, goes along to get along, kind of, you know, pulling the string a little bit prior to the 2018 elections. There's so much time between now and any campaign for 2020. I'd be careful. I'd be careful if I was the president. Larry Kudlow, his new economic guy, and a whole bunch of others, of rattling Nikki Haley's cage anymore, because she doesn't get confused. You may know that this week. On a local level, this is a fascinating bit of information. CCRI is, I guess, deluged with new students. You know, it's kind of funny. In Rhode Island and in New England, it seems to me that if anything is free, people come running for it, whether it's a product or even education. I don't say that lightly. It is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but CCRI, now that it's tuition-free, has just multiplied its enrollment by nearly double-fold, which I think, you know, begs the question, how are we doing this? That with the facilities that we have, I know there's renovations going on at CCRI Warwick, and God, it's necessary, because I don't know if you've ever been through that place. I don't know who the architect was in the 70s who thought this was a cool look, but it is like it is a dungeon. And I know they're doing everything they can with what they have to pretty that place up. So a facility question comes to my mind, and we're going to have to get some of the brass and CCRI to come in here and talk to us about this. By the way, I'm one of those people who believes that CCRI is a wonderful choice, especially for undergrads who do not know what they want to do with a major. Talk about a return on investment. The combination of CCRI for, you know, prerequisites and then getting to URI or RIC is something that every family ought to take a good hard look at. Get some of the ego of the college trip out of you and a little bit of the economic sense into you, and you'll find yourself at the end of that rainbow with a whole lot less debt than the average student has. Having said that, near doubling the enrollment is a puzzle for me. One of the things that they're doing, because of the problems with remediary education that they have to deal with, and some of the untrained scholars that are coming to CCRI, and now an abundance of them, they're lowering the threshold for graduation, reportedly, from 2.5 GPA to 2.0. You know, 2.0 is just a plain old C average. I think that's worth a conversation, too. You know, I'm one of those people that's quality versus quantity. I'd like to see everybody get a quality education, but in terms of performance, I'd like to see the graduation rate stay where they are, where it is, and let's see if we can find a way to educate these people at the level that we're supposedly supposed to do. I'm sure there's all sorts of nuances to that we need to discuss, and we'll try to get that done next week for you. But those are I wouldn't say alarming numbers, but they certainly do stop you like a truck. And finally, on the front page of the Providence Journal today, 7.5% salary increase for the major public employee union here in the state. Look, I don't begrudge everyday middle class and lower middle class, in some cases in this union, employees from getting raises. What I do have a problem with is a governor who puts a budget together and doesn't contemplate them. So you put the next fiscal year budget together, you don't put in the raises. Now, I understand negotiating-wise, if you put the number in, that kind of ends the negotiation. But not padding this budget to accommodate for what it's going to be a significant amount of millions of dollars in the budget for these raises is just not fiscally prudent. And that's the kind of thing that causes us to always chase our tail. And what happens? Someone else loses. So, look, you know, there's healthcare changes and co-share and co-payments that are increasing. It seems like a fair deal for these employees. As a taxpayer, I don't have a problem giving it to them, but I certainly want an administration that's going to allow for it, because guess what? The money doesn't grow on trees. I think you know that, especially in tax season, right? Especially this week when we've just, you know, written a lot of checks. Some of you may have had refunds. I wasn't so lucky. Anyway, look at this book. This is, so I bumped into my buddy Dan the other day, having a cold one, and he's sitting there talking about his book event coming up at the golf course. I mean, since when did you become an author? But this is fascinating. Welcome, great to have you.
Nice, thanks for having me.
This is, give me the executive summary. You've been a landlord in Woonsocket for how long?
17 years.
17 years. Yeah. You just retired from your full-time occupation.
I retired from my first, from my regular job in the electronics business in Massachusetts in supply chain.
Right. So I remember the day that you told me that you were retiring. I said, hey, congratulations. And then you said, oh, I got to go. I got stuff to do. What? I thought you're no. A pipe burst or something went on and you had to run. And the business of being a landlord is complicated.
Very.
Detailed.
Very. Yes.
Hard work.
Yes.
Many people in the state do this for a living.
Correct.
Worthwhile?
Definitely.
But some stories.
but I've had some interesting stories, and that's how I wrote a book.
All right. When we come back, some of the stories. Should be fun. Stay with us. So the book by now local author Dan Cesaroni with young Joe Calabro, who's a fine young journalist in the area. Dead Bodies, Snakes and Bedbugs, My Life as a Multi-Family Landlord. Now, look, I'm sure this is an easy read. This is one of these things that'll be, on the end table for, forever, but it's probably something you can blow through in an hour and get a good chuckle out of it. But some of the subject matter is, a conversation. And one of the chapters in this book, as I bleed through it there, Dan, is the nightclub fire, aftermath. I long railed against what I thought. By the way, we didn't do a pre-interview on this, so we're just kind of ripping on this, but I'm guessing instinctively that you had to deal with a lot of unnecessary protocols and requirements when the pendulum swung from the disaster at the nightclub fire to everybody having to splinter up in a way that to close businesses and really presented a problem. What went on for you?
Well, as a multifamily landlord, I was lucky. I didn't have to put sprinklers in, but I did have to hardwire smoke alarms to a general firebox in the house. And so right after the Station nightclub fire, I applied for the permit. We got the permit pretty quick, and then I had to have I hired a company called Electronic Alarms out of Warwick. I think they've been purchased by a bigger firm now out of Boston, but I still use them today, and they do my quarterly fire inspections.
A burden you didn't think you necessarily had? Why point it out as something worth writing about?
I thought it was something interesting that landlords had to do to make their buildings safer after the nightclub fire. So that's why we decided to put it in the book.
Yeah, it felt like a time from hell. The whole state was recovering from the trauma of those losses.
Yeah.
There was hardly anybody that didn't know somebody that had a loss in that fire.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't necessarily politically correct at the time to say, hey, you know what, this is too much. But all of a sudden it became apparent to me as we were taking a look at some of the major businesses out there and some of the small businesses,
correct,
restaurants and the like, they were shutting down because they couldn't handle what was required.
Right.
Did you feel that kind of pressure? Did
Yes.
the landlord community in general feel that kind of pressure?
Yeah, I think the landlord community felt that pressure, and I was one of the first ones in the city of Woonsocket to apply for a permit for these fire codes, for these fire boxes. And, we got them installed fairly quickly, and because I knew contractors were going to get busy, the pricing was going to go up higher, so that's why I applied early and, got the permit, and my contractor went in and hardwired 2 buildings in Woonsocket that I had, and so I was pretty relieved. I got my, the certificates, and that was it. And after that, we had to do quarterly fire inspections since then. So I've been doing them for like 17 years.
So when the viewer who will read this, but who is just watching this says, well, too bad. I mean, it's a safety issue. You say what?
Well, it was another added expense that a landlord had to apply to his building. And it wasn't, it wasn't a cheap expense. It was,
and not necessarily something you're going to pass through to the tenant either.
You can't, and that's another thing. You can't pass that through to the tenant. I mean, I'm not sure what the cost is now, but my cost was in excess of $35,000, and I'm a small businessman, and that was a lot of money.
Is the business of being a landlord worth the aggravation in general?
My opinion is yes. I think over the years you learn how to handle each situation, like a dead body, bed bugs.
We're going to get to that, right? But in general, you think it's worth it?
I do. I think it's a great business.
Are you handy?
No.
Because I'm a klutz, but I've looked at this kind of investment myself from time to time and thought, I don't know that I have the energy. The acumen I know I don't have, but you can always find people who are smart about keeping buildings in shape, right?
Yes. The key with a multifamily landlord is you should have a very good general maintenance person, which I do. I've had him for 20 years, and he's the type of person that knows how to fix everything, but more importantly, he knows how to determine what the actual problem is, especially if you have a leaky roof.
So that's an absolutely incumbent need. You have to have that.
Yes.
So you're kind of tied in a high-risk basis to the person who's handy if you're not.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I mean, can you do your own plumbing? Can you do your own electrical? Today, a lot of if you have to have a gas stove replaced, you have to have a licensed plumber. For the electrical outlet, you have to have a licensed electrician. So you have to be, licensed in the trades today to do a lot of work in these houses.
Yeah. There's a chapter here called The Tenant from Hell. We got to get one story out of this. I don't want to spoil the whole book, but we got to hear that when we come back. Stay with us. The fair city of Woonsocket, I guess. I don't know. There's downtown. Actually, I got to tell you, Woonsocket is a funny place. Between Pawtucket and Woonsocket, I don't know where the hell I'm going. I honestly don't. I mean, I think I know where I'm going, but Danny, I don't know where I'm going.
And I have a problem with Pawtucket because I'm not familiar with Pawtucket. I know Woonsocket because I grew up there, but I always get lost in Pawtucket.
So it's a new book. It's a short read. It's a great local project that Dan Cesaroni has embarked upon. I guess you just wake up one night and say, you know what, I'm going to write this thing because people got to know about these stories.
A lot of interesting stories, and that's the main reason I wrote it.
The Tenant from Hell. Give me a little bit. Was there only one?
No, there were multiple of them.
Right.
One of them I can explain that he created a disturbance in the apartment. The police were called. The police went to his apartment and found a loaded musket rifle. Sent him to the ACI for 5 days. Made bail, came back. In this process, I already had possession of my apartment back. I evicted him. And when I evicted him, the movers, we had the sheriff, the police, the movers, came up to me and said, Dan, we got a little problem. And I said, what, you're moving his stuff out? And we can't move the mattress. And I said, why's that? Because it's loaded with bed bugs.
Oh, jeez.
So that's a whole other story how I got it out of there. But anyway, I had to have the whole building fumigated, and it was a 6-unit building. Because bed bugs, if you do one apartment, they tend to move to the other apartment.
Right.
So I had to have the whole building done.
I have a buddy who's a hotel manager, and he says once you get them, it's like chasing a chicken. It's awful hard to get control, right?
Fortunately, the company did a great job, Griggs and Brown, and I never had them again. But so, like I said, I had to also dispose of the mattress.
But you got a
too.
guy with a gun charge. He comes back. Did he want back in? Obviously, he wanted back in. He was only down for 5 days, right?
Well, he went back in because he wanted to get some stuff after he, figured out he was getting evicted.
See, this is what we all, certainly in our younger days, I mean, I lived in apartments, and I think about it now, and I wouldn't call it communal living, but it is cooperative living.
Definitely,
right?
Definitely cooperative living.
Do you have advice for people who are looking to rent in terms of what they ought to look for from a landlord and/or other tenants. You know, how to create an environment or choose an environment that will be conducive to the way they want to live, and just have peace of mind and know that they're not going to be up all night with the noise or drug dealers here or criminals there. I mean, it's hard to project, right?
Yeah, you know, I'm a firm believer in background checks. I run criminal, credit, sex offender checks, and then I also use the e-court system in Rhode Island, which basically you get the court records right online. So between those two things and my application process, which, you know, asks some important questions, I can weed out, you know, 80% of the bad stuff.
Okay, so that's great advice for a landlord, but also it seems to me that's great advice for a potential tenant to see if the landlord is putting you through that rigor.
Correct.
If your landlord's not putting you through that rigor,
right,
there's a chance that you're going to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation.
It could be a bad situation.
Do you think most of the landlords in Woonsocket and/or throughout the state are doing that kind of diligence?
No.
That's not good news.
No. Yeah.
Because why? Because of the buck?
It costs $50 to run the background checks. Short money for, you know.
Long time aggravation.
Long time aggravation.
Are the landlords in this state a collective group, or is everybody just kind of on their own? I mean, is there a lobby? Is there a sense of unity about the business and the issues that come up?
Most part on their own, but, you know, there's a group of us, I think, in the Woonsocket area that know each other.
You take care of each other a little bit on the issues?
And you know, we probably trade tenants once in a while. And for whatever
I'll
situation.
trade you the Smiths for the Jones and a family to be named later, that kind of thing? Is that it? Is one of the trades in the book? Anyway, what's the motive for people to pick up the book? Again, we'll show. Oh, by the way, there's a reading. What do we call it? Put the Sunday thing. It's a launch party. We're launching the part. You know, come on by, have a notch, and talk to Danny about some of these stories, and pick up the book from 4 to 7 o'clock at Kirkbrake Country Club. Of course, that's in Lincoln. What will people enjoy most about this quick read?
Well, they'll enjoy the stories about the, you know, as the title says, dead bodies, snakes, and bed bugs, and the interesting tenants that, you know, were involved with that. And then it also gives some, I think, for young folks trying to, deciding whether they want to invest in real estate, it gives, at the end of the book, I give 20 of the best real estate tips I think I can give.
Perfect.
And during each chapter, I've also explained, you know, some of the property management stuff for existing investors, what they can do from a property management point of view to make their property run better.
All right, there you go. You're going to get a laugh, and you're going to get some advice. Maybe you'll see you Sunday at Kirkbrake. If not, on Amazon, wherever you can get the books online. It's a nice investment and a good chuckle. Be right back. Tomorrow night, we will take a look at Nikki Haley's situation and what message it may bring for professional and political women in this country. So stay tuned for that, or join us tomorrow night for that. And, of course, on the radio at 3 until 6 on WPRO. Thanks for watching.